Hello?
Is that Agent Chock?
Yep, that's me. Who's this?
Who I am is not important. What is important is that you listen. Put your phone on scrambler too.
Can I just stop you there? You see, Betty spilled tea on our phone scrambler the other day, and now it just converts everything into Welsh for some reason. But there is a man coming to fix it on Wednesday, apparently.
I don't care about phone problems. We got an enigma here.
Well, that's no use either. I mean, even if we had an Enigma machine, nobody's had one of those things since World War II.
I'm not talking about a code machine. I'm talking about a mystery.
Oh, right. Well, why didn't you say that in the first place? Honestly, I don't know. You phone up in the middle of the night, talking in riddles, and I'm quite busy here, and it's chucking it down with rain, and I didn't bring my big coat, and I'm going to get soaked going to the car park.
Just shut up and listen. This is big.
Well, I don't care how big it is. I bet it's not as big as my big coat. That's really big. Not that I've got it with
Are
me.
you the guy to investigate a mystery or not?
Oh, yeah, you see...
What if I told you someone had managed to take complex avionics, break them down into a simple treatment, and get it out at a bargain basement price?
Well, I'd say they were talking Bob.
We need you to get to the bottom of this, and we need it PDQ, mister.
Well, in that case, give me 48 hours and...
We don't got 48 hours. We need a video right now. Can you do that or not?
Well, yeah, if I have to.
Good. 1 hour then. And Agent Chock,
Yeah?
you really don't want to disappoint us.
Oh. Okay, then. So, as promised, the Virtualcol A220 for FSX and P3D. Here it is. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the outside of it, check out the modelling, check out the texturing, and then when we've done that, we'll check out the virtual cockpit and see what that looks like. And then after we've done that, we'll examine the avionics and how they've treated that sort of thing. Okay, you ready? Let's make a video here. Hello.
Agent Chock.
Yes, and before you say anything else, no, I haven't got a phone scrambler. No, I haven't got an Enigma machine. It's raining. I haven't got my big coat with me, and I'm really busy making something for some mysterious bloke who phoned up in the small hours of this morning. So who is this, and what is it that you want?
Bond, James Bond, 007 of Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Well, I'm no expert on spying, but isn't it a bit stupid to go around telling everyone your name, code number, and which organisation you work for if you're supposed to be some kind of secret agent?
I never thought of that.
Well, anyway, what is it that you
We
want?
need you to make a video for us.
Not you as well.
So, someone else has contacted you about this.
Someone else? Look, mate, the phone hasn't stopped bloody ringing about this malarkey.
Do you know who it was? Was it Blofeld?
Well, oddly enough, the bloke didn't give me his name. I guess he must have gone to a different secret agent school than the one that you went to. Anyway, just let me make this video and...
So you'll do it?
No, not your video. The video that I'm making now. And when I've done that, give me a bell back in about an hour and I'll see what I can do for you, okay?
So you are willing to help us?
Well, never say never again, eh? You see what I did there?
Are you referring to that Justin Bieber song?
Oh, fuck. I should have done the one about M people, shouldn't I? Look, just forget it. I'll speak to you in about an hour, okay?
Until later, Agent Chock.
Yeah, whatever. Sorry about that. Virtualcol A220. Let's check out the outside of it, yeah? Ready? Let's go. So, here we go. Virtualcol Airbus A220. Nice model. Runs well in the simulator, as do most Virtualcol models, because they very much err on the side of cheap and cheerful, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I'm actually quite a fan of Virtualcol because I think that the add-ons that are sort of cheap and cheerful and look the part and don't require hours and hours to study how to fly the things, I certainly think those things have their place in the flight simulator world. If that wasn't true, companies like Abacus would have gone out of business years ago, and companies like Virtualcol would not exist. People that are into high-end flight simulator companies like the sort of stuff that Flight Sim Labs make, PMDG, A2A and what have you, are probably not going to be fans of this thing, but they probably don't represent the majority of flight simmers. they might be the most vocal group of flight simmers, the sort of people that buy PMDG and Flight Sim Labs and that kind of stuff. But there are many more people out there that like cheap and cheerful lookalikes that are easy to fly. So Virtualcol certainly has its place, and like I say, I don't mean that in a bad way. I like the stuff that Virtualcol do. This is a nice model. Now, it's not completely escaped criticism. I know a couple of people voiced the opinion that they thought maybe the windows were not quite the right size, and I've heard more than one person say that they didn't think the undercarriage was perhaps the right height, meaning that the aircraft didn't sit at the right height above the ground. But what I did was I came up with this, which is a screenshot of the Virtualcol A220, and I've tried to get the picture as close to alignment with a photograph of the real thing, and I think you'll agree that, you know, it might not be 100%, but it captures the essence of it. So I've not really got a problem with the way the thing looks. Like a lot of Virtualcol stuff, it doesn't have absolutely everything on the 3D model modeled as a polygon. It gets a lot of the work done with textures, but that's okay. The textures are reasonably alright. They're not massively high resolution. I can show you if I zoom in on the textures. They're okay, but you get real close to them and you're not really able to read those stencils. If that bothers you, I guess you could tweak the textures up yourself, but it doesn't bother me. It's okay. The thing looks all right, as long as you don't look at it from sort of 2mm away. So looks wise, I think it's pretty good. So that was the 100 variant that we were looking at, and this is the 300 variant, the slightly larger version of the 220. And that is one of the things that is a plus point with Virtualcol products. You get a lot of bang for your bucks. This add-on costs really not much more than about 20 quid, and for that you get 2 different versions of the aeroplane and a ton of paint jobs. And that's the general rule with Virtualcol stuff, is that you get a lot of bang for your bucks. Now, I know that there are some people that are not fans of light versions of aircraft. They're sort of people that would buy Flight Sim Lab stuff, PMDG stuff, A2A stuff, are probably not going to be massive fans of the kind of thing that Virtualcol bang out. But personally, I'm a bit of a fan of them, and I've got all kinds of high-end airliners, PMDG ones, Flight Sim Lab ones, iFly ones, A2A ones, all kinds of stuff like that. And so it's not like I don't like those things and I don't use them, but sometimes you just want something that you can kind of jump in and go with, and that's really where Virtualcol stuff sits. So a lot of bang for your bucks. It's a nice model, a nice 2 models. You get a lot of paint jobs, and it runs well because it's sort of not over the top in terms of modeling. As I say, not everything is a polygon on the model. Sometimes it's textures doing the work. So I don't think there's really much to complain about as far as the models are concerned. Now, when we get inside the thing, that's sort of a continuing story. Anyone who's got any of Virtualcol's add-ons will have accepted the fact that they are cheap and cheerful, and the virtual cockpits was never really a strong point for Virtualcol stuff. They were always a little bit ropey. They've started to make things a little bit better. Their CRJ has got a sort of reasonably okay virtual cockpit, and there are 1 or 2 other models in their product line that have got reasonably okay virtual cockpits. But when it comes to this A220, they've upped their game a little bit. So you'll notice that on the overhead here, gone is the temptation to use a texture for the switches rather than actual 3D knobs that you can mess around with and turn and stuff like that. So full-on 3D modelling on the overhead, full-on 3D modelling on the central pedestal, and 3D modelling on all of the switches on the forward control panel. So it's actually quite a nice virtual cockpit. I don't think, I don't think it's sort of going to start blowing away the sort of thing that you see in Captain Sim and PMDG and Flight Sim Lab and iFlies and all that kind of stuff, but it's not bad. And so full marks to Virtualcol for definitely upping the game where this sort of thing's concerned, because you have to bear in mind that more bang involves more bugs, and this is a very inexpensive add-on. As I say, it's really not much more than about 20 quid, and for that you're getting 2 very different aeroplanes and loads of paint jobs. And for the amount of work that's involved in that and creating the virtual cockpit, I think they've done an okay job with this. I don't think it's that bad at all. So yeah, pretty good. And one of the interesting things that it has is it has sort of like raindrops modelled on the windshield, and when you turn on the wipers are wiping the rain off the windshield and stuff like that. So it's not a bad virtual cockpit. Okay, so here we are in the air. Now, about those avionics. Let's get in the cockpit. I'll just get the view going. So there's your rain on the windscreen with the wipers wiping that out of the way. And if I turn the wiper off, you can see that it's not the best depiction of rain on the windscreen. It's not animated or anything like that, but it's okay. Kind of fun like that. And you can hear that the wipers are making a wiper noise. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn that off because it's kind of clunking away a little bit. Bit of a delay on the sound stopping there, but yeah, it works. Now, one of the, I won't say criticisms, I'll say features of Virtualcol stuff is that it's cheap and cheerful and relatively simple. So a lot of the time what they do is they tweak up default avionics and they have them kind of look the part rather than having all of the features that the real thing have. Now, the real Airbus A220 is one of the most modern and sophisticated in terms of avionics airliners that there is, and you'd expect that. I mean, the thing only made its sort of like first commercial flights a couple of years ago, and at that point it was a Bombardier product. Of course, we know that last year in 2018 Airbus closed a deal with Bombardier and the Canadian government, so that Airbus now has I think it's 50.01% ownership of the company. Bombardier has I think around about 30%, and the rest of the ownership of shares and what have you is with an investment company, and that deal's likely to stay in place for I think until 2024, and there's another deal in place where production, even though they're going to produce the A220 in Mobile, Alabama, it also has to be until at least 2041 also produced in Canada. So that's kind of part of the deal that's going on. So this thing's like really modern in terms of avionics, and if you want to know the avionics that it has, they are Collins Proline Fusion, I think more version 21 avionics, which you find in some private jets and what have you. So they are really, really sophisticated avionics. They've got things like synthetic vision on them, and CP-DLC, which is controller-pilot data link communications. And that's kind of an interesting one, particularly where flight simulation is concerned. And this is one of the reasons why I'm going to say something that you're probably not going to expect, which is I think that with a bit of playing around, you can make this a fairly realistic experience in terms of how the real aircraft is controlled. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, CP DLC, controller-pilot data link communications. If you're not familiar with that, what that actually is that is a sort of text-based communication system between the aircraft and air traffic control. And what it allows pilots and air traffic controllers to do is communicate via text. Now, so on CP DLC systems, what you have in the cockpit is you have a screen that you can display that has a bunch of preset messages that you can send to air traffic control. So you just kind of click on them and that'll fire a text to air traffic control, and they can reply to you using the same method. So let's say you wanted to increase your cruise altitude by 2,000 feet up to a different flight level. You could send that as a text message to air traffic control, and they could reply back to you with text saying, yes, that's approved, you're cleared, and then you can send them a text message saying, yes, acknowledged, increasing, climbing to that altitude and what have you. Now, why would you want to do that if you could do it via the radio? Well, the reason that you'd want to do that is there is absolutely no confusion when you have a message on screen saying you are cleared up to flight level 250 or what have you, and there's no confusion with air traffic control when you've sent an acknowledgement to them. And if you know anything about radio communications, you'll know that some radio communications can be blocked, and there have in fact been accidents in the past where people thought that air traffic control messages had gone through when in fact they hadn't. In fact, the world's worst air accident with airliners, which was where two Boeing 747s collided with one another on the runway. There were a few reasons for that accident, but one of the reasons for it was that one of the air traffic control messages was not received properly, and there was a bit of confusion between the controller at Los Rodeos Airport and the pilot and co-pilot on board the KLM 747, which ended up colliding with Pan Am 747 on the runway. Now, CP DLC would completely have negated that problem. Now, it's not the only problem that caused that accident. Another problem was the KLM pilot was a little bit stressed, and he was concerned about running out of hours and what have you. So he took off without a takeoff clearance. But CP DLC would avoid that problem because everyone would know messages have been received and what have you, and everyone would know what they're doing, and there is absolutely no danger of a transmission being blocked by another transmission or not being received and what have you. Now, that system is not implemented on the avionics of this Virtualcol Airbus A220. However, if you do this and get your ATC window up, this ATC window with the menu is kind of akin to how CP DLC actually works, because I can click on one of these messages to request a full stop landing or request a touch and go and what have you, and then what I will get is I will get a text message back from air traffic control in the flight simulator saying yes, that's approved or what have you. Now you can have the sound on or the sound off for that, and if you use any sort of air traffic control programs, you know, like one of the more sophisticated payware ones and what have you, they have all kinds of options on them for that sort of thing. And if you used that, it would be very, very similar to that CPDLC system. Now, so what I think is going to occur, now this isn't particularly to do with this Virtualcol A220, but what I think is going to occur with flight simulation in the not too distant future is high-end airliners, if they are to replicate the avionics properly, what they are going to have to do is they are going to have to implement that a simulation of that CPDLC system. Excuse me. And I think probably the smart way to go about that would be for aircraft developers such as Flight Sim Labs, PMDG, A2A, iFly and what have you, to work in conjunction with some of the other third-party developers that make kind of air traffic control add-ons and flight crew add-ons. And we're already starting to see a little bit of that going on. So I think that that's kind of good news for things like FS2 crew and multi-crew experience, because what you could do as a developer of an aircraft is you could kind of make your cockpit gauges compatible with air traffic control add-ons and add-ons such as FS2 crew and multi-crew experience, so that you could have sort of souped up avionics. And we already do see something a little bit like that, where airplane add-ons can have add-on radars added to them. You know, if you've got like a weather program, you can have the sort of radar working in your PMDG 737 or what have you, and that kind of thing. And I think that's probably the way it's going to go. And we're already, as I say, we're already seeing that a little bit now. Some of you that are au fait with the world of flight simulation will be aware that PMDG announced a little while back that what they were bringing out was something called global operations, and a lot of people were somewhat underwhelmed by that, because PMDG had said, oh yes, we're going to make a big announcement, and everyone was thinking, oh, they're going to do the MD-11 for P3D, or oh, they're bringing out a 737 MAX or what have you. And when PMDG announced that it was that global operations, a lot of people were a bit, yeah. However, personally, I was quite excited by that, and I think the reason that a lot of people were a bit nonplussed by it was they didn't quite understand the implications of what that would mean. What it would mean is that you can have a working ACARS system on your add-on aircraft. And those of you that are familiar with how sort of airliners work and what have you, I'm sort of familiar with this from my job and what have you, is that a lot of communications are sent via the ACARS systems to base of operations, and that's kind of how a lot of airliners are operated these days. For example, flight crews will send an ACARS request to their base of operations for the flight plan. The flight plan will be sent directly to the aircraft from the base of operations and go straight into the FMC. And that's the kind of stuff that CPDLC can do as well. So a combination of ACARS and CPDLC will be the way that airliners are going, and that PMDG add-on is kind of showing the way that things will go. And I would hope, and I think it's quite likely, that third-party aircraft developers are going to kind of work in conjunction with other third-party developers to get that kind of thing working. And we have already seen that with PMDG's global operations add-on, because Aerosoft's most recent Airbus package, which was the A318, 319, 320 and 321, was the first add-on that was announced to be compatible with PMDG's global operations, which means that the ACARs would work, which means that potentially it could upload flight plans in a more realistic way and deal with things. Now, ACARs is sometimes used for mundane stuff. The kind of thing that we get at work is, I know, a Thomas Cook airliner will be coming back from Spain or something, and halfway across France, they'll send an ACARS message to us at the airport saying, oh, we've got a bit of an unruly passenger, we've managed to calm them down, but we'd like police to meet the aircraft to escort this passenger off and what have you. We get that kind of thing via ACARS from the crew. We get ACARS messages about, oh, we've got a disabled passenger that needs specific help or what have you, or we've got someone that's ill on board and all this kind of stuff. That kind of thing goes on all the time, and that CPDLC is kind of like the latest and greatest version of that. It's not up and running in the real world in a lot of countries, but it is the way things are going. Now, why am I bringing this up when I've already said that the avionics on this thing are rather simplified? Well, if we take a look here, down on this screen here, you can see that there is a route planned in on the FMC, and this thing is flying that route. Now, how I got that route into this aeroplane was I loaded a flight plan in from P3D's menu. So I went up to the menu, and I went here, and I went to the flight planner, and I loaded in a flight plan that I already had. It came into the FMC, and I was good to go. Now, a lot of people that are into kind of realism will go, oh no, that's not very realistic. But it actually is now. It is kind of the way things are going in terms of how flight plans very often go into the FMC. Now, that's not to say that you can't manually put a flight plan into this FMC. You absolutely can if you want to. It doesn't necessarily handle SIDS and stars particularly realistically, but what it will do is it will allow you to select various sort of transitions and what have you. So you could theoretically, and you can see that I've got a transition in here. Now you could theoretically have it fly the SIDS or the stars by creating a flight plan that used the nav aids that the real SID or star used. So you can kind of get it to fly SIDS and stars automatically, even though it's not sort of fully implemented or what have you. But this method of getting the flight plan in that I used here is not a million miles away from how things are really done in this aircraft. Now, you can see that this thing has electronic checklists on it and what have you as well, which the real aircraft has. What it doesn't have is it doesn't have all of the tabs that the real avionics system has, and it doesn't quite let you split things in every way possible that it is to split things on the real display of the Collins Proline Fusion system. So there are a lot more options on the real thing for how you can split things, how you can have things display, so you can have completely different things on this side to what you have on the other side and what have you, and there's a bit less of that going on. But having said that, I think there is enough here for it to be fairly representative of the displays that you would typically have using an A220 these days. So yes, it's not completely got absolutely every single avionics system that the real thing has, but it's not a bad replication of how the thing actually works in practice. And we have to, as I say, we have to bear in mind this thing's 20 quid, you know, so you're not paying a hell of a lot for it. And it does have some things. For example, down here you can see that on the primary flight display it displays your flight number and the date and stuff like that. The real one does that. You can see that it's using a navigation source of the flight management system like the CRJ does. You can select all that kind of stuff if you want to. This thing has LNAV and VNAV capabilities. I'm only using LNAV at the moment, and I'm having it climb to sort of a preset altitude, but I can have it do vertical navigation if I want to. You can see that that thing does actually work, and there it goes. It's climbing. I don't think I want it to climb at that rate there. So I think what I'll do is I'll have it climb at a bit less of a mental rate there, and I'll just have it go up to 25,000 feet. Now you'll notice that the auto throttle went up there, and you can see that the throttle is moving. That is like the real Airbus A220. It doesn't have a throttle like full-on Airbuses like the A320. The throttle on, if you're familiar with an A320, 318, 319, 321, the throttle isn't motorized on those. It has preset detents that you put it onto, which has come in for some criticism. The throttle on an A220 is motorized. It does move. It's a bit more like the throttle on a 747 or a 737. And personally, I'm certainly probably like most pilots, a bit more happy to see the throttle position reflecting the actual thrust settings that are on there. So that part is realistic. What isn't implemented on this thing, which is implemented on the real thing, is this thing here, which we're looking at here, which is kind of like a sort of, for want of a better description, it's kind of like a trackball stroke mouse. The avionics systems on the A220 have a cursor that can be moved around the screen. It looks like a little propeller. The mouse cursor, if you will, looks like a little propeller, and you can move around the screen and click on things. In lieu of that, what we can do is we can use our mouse to click on things, and so that's actually a little bit nicer than using this thing here. You know, I mean, you get used to it on the real thing using a sort of a trackball and a cursor system, because obviously you couldn't have a mouse sort of sliding about on the central pedestal of an airliner. So it is kind of the practical solution to it, but we can pretty much replicate that by using our mouse and clicking on things in lieu of the actual cursor system that's on there. So primary flight display looks pretty much like the real thing. The second display here can have all kinds of different things displayed, and that's like the real thing. What it's not displaying on here, on this second display here, is this is where you can display the CP DLC messages, and any sort of ACARS and CP DLC messages also appear on the left hand side of this primary flight display in the real thing. It doesn't do that, so a little bit limited in that sense, but you know, not the end of the world. What it does have, however, is it has this thing which the real A220 does indeed have, which is the radio communications panel is up here. That's a good thing, and something that pilots have praised with the A220, because you're not got your head down here, not looking out of the window, excuse me, when you're messing around with the radios, and nor are you using the FMC to tune the radios, and then, you know, not having a sort of very obvious display of what the radio frequencies are. This thing's great. It has the radio frequencies well and truly on display here. You know exactly what you've got tuned in on things, and when you're looking at it, you're also looking out of the windscreen, so that's, you know, a very safe way to go about things. Now, most of these buttons work, not all of them, so you can see that I'm not getting a mouse cursor when I go over these sort of inboard and outboard buttons here, but things like the caution warning light, I can cancel that, and the side stick and the stick pusher and all that kind of stuff, and the navigation source, and the course window. This button here, this course window, is actually on the real thing, is actually a bit more multifunction than purely the course. It's a dial that can be switched with these buttons here for various modes. So these buttons do work, but they don't do quite as much as the real thing would do. All of this stuff on the upfront control panel works. All the buttons do what they say they do. And this thing's replicated over on the right hand side if you fancy being a co-pilot. Now down on the central pedestal, this stuff works so that you can input stuff manually. So if you want to put a route in manually, you absolutely can do on this. So if you don't want to use that load of flight simulator, flight plan automatically, you can manually go through it and stick all that in if you want to in the FMC. So this stuff does work, and you'll notice that it works on the other side as well. So it's not just a bogus one on the right hand side. A lot of these buttons work for sort of the marker audio and all this kind of stuff. These buttons here work. Some of this stuff doesn't work here, but then again it's kind of like cursor related stuff, and we've got a mouse instead. You've got these things down here for flap settings and what have you, and all of this stuff, some of which doesn't work, some of which does. Locking the cockpit door, you can't really lock the cockpit door, but then again we don't have to worry about that kind of thing on our flight simulator. So these buttons down here don't work, but the vast majority of stuff that you would want to work does actually work on this thing, and that's true of the overhead as well. There are really very few buttons up here that don't actually work. If I had a criticism at all, it would be that we haven't got all of the cockpit lighting options that we would have on the real thing. So maybe when you're flying it at night, you're perhaps not going to have all of those nice sort of subdued lighting things that you could have on the real thing. But I would say that 95% of the buttons up here and dials and what have you on this overhead do actually work. So if you want to start this thing in a realistic way, you can do. Or alternatively, if you want to hit Control E and just whack it off the runway, you absolutely can do that. Notice that the steering tiller doesn't work. So not quite as sophisticated as some add-ons that have a working steering tiller, but I can live with that. You can use your rudder controls to steer it, and that's okay. Now, oddly enough, you can see here that what we've got is the stall yoke pusher and what have you. Now, despite the fact that this is an Airbus, although as we know it was developed by Bombardier and then became an Airbus, so control-wise it's a little bit more like a Boeing than most Airbuses are. So if it, for example, is threatening to stall or what have you, what it actually will do is it'll push the throttle speed up. But unlike an Airbus A320, that would have a stick pusher that would push the nose down to try and recover things. And an Airbus A320 might, for example, if you were getting an overspeed warning, it might pitch the nose up to try and alleviate the overspeed and what have you. The A220 works a little bit different. If that's getting an overspeed warning, it would back the throttle off and it would automatically deploy the spoilers. So those of you that are a bit like, I don't like the Airbus taking control away from me, I prefer Boeings and all that kind of stuff, this is probably a little bit more like a Boeing in terms of how it works than your sort of your A320 and your A321. so there are a few other things on this. It has a side stick controller like an A320 or an A321 or 318, 319, but it doesn't have the same feedback system that an A350 has, for example. So some similarities with an Airbus, but some similarities with a Boeing. So if you kind of like the idea of an Airbus, but you're a bit of a Boeing fan and you don't want to spend a lot of money on, I don't know, a Flight Sim Labs one or the Aerosoft one or what have you, although they are both pretty good, you know, so I recommend them. You could maybe go for this and have a little bit of Airbus type fun without breaking the bank. So yes, it is very much akin to a lot of other Virtualcol products in that the avionics are not massively sophisticated, but I think they are sophisticated enough to give you the kind of experience of day-to-day running of a flight, if not, perhaps not letting you have every single display option you possibly could have on all of these 5 screens that you could have in the real aeroplane. So avionics-wise, it's not as bad as some people would have you believe. Here you go. You can see that it's implementing a turn there because we've just hit another waypoint on our flight plan there. So you can see that this is absolutely having no problem flying and following a flight plan. I mean, because I'm climbing here and I'm well above 10,000 feet, I guess really what I should have done when I hit 10,000 feet is I should have knocked the landing lines off for a kickoff. But what I should also have done is switched it to sort of reading in Mach. And there, come on, you can do it. You're gonna do it. There we go, Mach, and then you know, get that Mach number up. There we go. So it's pushing things up a little bit. You can see the throttle's moving there, so it has got an automated throttle, and you know we can take the climb rate up a little bit, just to make sure that we don't overspeed. Like that, and there you go. It's kicking up and getting us up to cruise altitude. So this thing does follow flight plans. It's perfectly fine at doing that sort of thing, and you know, there's something to be said for it being a little bit simpler because you know there are quite a few more high-end payware add-ons out there that you know don't follow LNAV and VNAV perhaps as well as they should have. So you can't fault this one. It does at least follow a flight plan. So there you go. I think this is quite a worthy addition to your hangar. It's a pretty looking model. In fact, it's 2 models. You get, now when I say massive amount of paint jobs, that's normally the ilk for most Virtualcol add-ons, is that you get a lot of bang for your buck. You've got tons of paint jobs for all the airlines and what have you. But where the A220 is concerned, there actually at this point aren't that many airlines that are flying it. That's likely to change because it is a seriously impressive airliner. It's very, very popular with pilots, and it's very, very popular with airlines because it has a very, very high dispatch reliability rate. I think it's something like 99.8% or something like that. It's seriously impressive. There are only sort of like some of the older Boeing 737s that can kind of match that kind of level of dispatch reliability. And I'm talking about sort of like the 737-200s with that. There are lots of leasing companies that are interested in buying this thing, but there are only about 4 or 5 airlines that actually operate at the moment. There are more airlines that are interested in buying it. So when I say massive amount of paint jobs, I mean pretty much every paint job that is on the real world things. You get it in this, and you get the 220-300 and the 220-100 as well. So you get both versions of it. There is supposedly going to be another version of the Airbus A220, which it is being mooted at the moment, which would be the Airbus A220-500. Now that would be a more direct competitor with some of the larger 737 Maxes, and it would also be a direct competitor with things like the A320 and A321neo, and obviously that would be sort of Airbus shooting itself up the arse. So what a lot of the people think is going to occur is, if they go ahead with producing the A220-500, what will then happen is that the A320 will be developed a little bit further to be more of a competitor with the prospective airliners that Boeing are working on. So not quite the 787. It's not quite size-wise with that, but Boeing have another sort of prospective airliner in the pipeline, and Boeing really, at the time that this video, if you're watching this at the time that it comes out, then you'll know of current events. If you're watching it a little bit later, it's currently 2019, early part of April, and the Boeing 737 MAX is currently grounded across the world because of a couple of accidents with related to its flight operation systems, and Boeing are currently working on that. So they've got a few problems, Boeing, at the moment, and they need to address it, and that's, was not helped by the fact that Bombardier joined up with Airbus and said that they were going to build the A220 in Mobile, Alabama. So the A220 is good news for the airlines, and it's good news for pilots, but it's not quite so good news for Boeing at the moment. But I'm sure Boeing have been through worse things than that and come out the other side. Let's not forget the first prototype of the Flying Fortress crashed when it was being shown to the Air Force, and it didn't stop that being a massive success. So Boeing will bounce back, I'm sure. And the tragedy of those accidents with the 737 MAX are obviously a really horrendous thing, and certainly a human tragedy. But I'm sure Boeing will sort that out and get the MAX back into the air fairly soon. But back to this A220, as I say, I think this is even if you're kind of like, oh no, I like super realistic airliners and what have you, I think you could do worse than to give this a bit of a try, because it's a fun thing to fly, and it sort of offers a little bit of a taste of the way avionics are going with the CPDLC system, and keep an eye on that PMDG global operations as well, and all the other stuff that I was talking about that, because I think that's the way things are going to go. Now, back on the external view. Let's have a look at this thing. The engine sounds, they're okay. They're not the best engine sound in the world. They're all right. But of course, that's one of those aftermarket things that you can get. Add-on engine sounds and what have you. So if that really concerned you, you could buy some sort of add-on engine sounds, or use some engine sounds from a different add-on that you've got, or you could even make your own if you wanted to. It's relatively easy to do that. So last look around the virtual cockpit. So overhead's pretty realistic. Of course, we've not got anything like sort of circuit breakers working or anything like that. You're not going to get anything like that on an add-on of this nature. But as I say, overhead, that all works, or about 95% of it works and does what it's supposed to do. And again, most of this stuff works. The vast majority of this stuff that you would want to work works. All of these displays work. But they're perhaps a little bit simplified. It looks like I'm coming up to 25,000 feet there, so I'm going to whack this up a little bit more to get up to my cruise altitude. There's some feet. And I think we can afford to get the speed up a little bit. Like that. Because, yeah, we're doing alright at the minute. And so ground speed 523, true airspeed 502, so we're alright. And it would appear that we are there we go. Yeah, we're sort of just crossing the English Channel. Because anyone who's used to flying out of the UK will know that normally when you fly back from the continent, the moment you approach the coastline of the UK, you can usually see a big U-shaped, UK-shaped set of cloud cover over there, and no exception at the minute. Incidentally, whilst we're looking at this, of the titles of this video, it says that it's using prepared version 4.4. It's actually not. This is the latest version of prepared. This is the 4.5 version that came out this week, or last week I should say. So this thing works perfectly well in the latest version of prepared. And another thing, if you watched the entire video and you saw those little jokey animations that I put in there, the thing that I was alluding to in those sort of jokey telephone conversations where the agent says to me they've managed to do a simplified treatment of sophisticated avionics, I think you know what I'm talking about now with that, because I think they have. I think that's kind of cool. Now, that's the end of our look at the Virtualcol Airbus A220. As I say, if you, as I normally do, if you like this sort of content, or there's things that you want me to cover and what have you, place your comments down on the bottom bit of YouTube. If there's things that you want to see, you can find out my email address off my YouTube channel page and what have you, or you can put your comments down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that notification button. So that you can see more content from me, and stick around for a little bit of news related to another flight simulator add-on.
So that was the Virtualcol Airbus A220. I hope you enjoyed that, and you'll note that it said stick around for a couple of bits of news. First bit of news, if you have seen other videos on my channel, you'll know that the other day I put one out for Chocks Hangar, covering a preview of Aeroplane Heaven's Hangar HE111P, which features PBR texturing on its exterior and some PBR texturing on its interior on the virtual cockpit, and I commented that on my preview. Aeroplane Heaven have since contacted me and told me that the reason that they didn't fully go for it on the virtual cockpit with PBR textures was because they, at the time they were doing it, Lockheed Martin's prepared version 4.5 wasn't out yet, and they didn't know what they'd be able to get away with, so they decided to limit the usage of PBR textures on the virtual cockpit. Now version 4.5 of prepared has come out. They are considering sticking a patch on their Hangar HE111P with a bit more PBR texturing on the virtual cockpit. They told me that it depends to some extent on how well the thing sells, because obviously they've got to spend time on it. I would think that it's kind of likely that they will do that, because I expect that their Hangar HE111 will sell pretty well, because it's very nice. I certainly recommend it. If you've not had a look at it, take a look on my channel. There is a video preview of it. The other bit of news is that I've got another video, episode 3 of Chocks Hangar, is because I want them to keep coming thick and fast, is going to be out by the end of this week, possibly uploading on Saturday, and that one is going to be something a little bit different, and not particularly expensive either. So if you're into aviation and you want to try something a little bit different that I can pretty much guarantee you'll find interesting and probably like, then look out for that. So if you're not subscribed to my channel, you might want to consider hitting that subscription button. Certainly you probably want to click that notification bell on YouTube so that you get a notification of when a new Chocks Hangar video is out. And that way you'll be able to see it as soon as the thing gets uploaded. So, but that is all for now from Chocks Hangar. Hope you enjoyed that A220 review and some of the fun stuff that was on it as well. Hope you like that as well. Don't forget to put your comments down below and get in touch if you want me to cover anything specific. But for now, I'll say cheery bye from Chocks Hangar, and have fun everyone. See ya.